Hello everybody, this is Shalancia Daniel from the Creativity Shell, and today we are going to do a tutorial on how to make this adorable but very ultra reversible tunic dress. As you can see, this dress is fully reversible with one print on one side and a fully finished printed dress on the other. It is super comfortable, it's really fun to make and really easy to make, and especially if any of you guys are sewing to send dresses overseas, I highly recommend the tunic dress. It gives the wearer two dresses in one. It's ultra modest, ultra comfortable, and it fits with a lot of the styles that you might find in parts of Africa, parts of Asia, and it's really great for the children that when they are receiving clothing, especially clothing coming from the US or Canada, that the items that they are getting, they do, offer a lot of coverage. We have a lot of girls, especially who might be living in orphanages, might not have the protection of family members to protect them. So anything that we can do to help them and to prevent people from taking advantage of them and using their clothing as an excuse to do so, I highly recommend doing it. And that's one of the main inspirations behind this reversible tunic dress. If you have our tunic dress pattern, then you are ready to begin. To download a copy of the pattern, you can get it from our creativityshell.org website or our new website, which is creativityconnects.org. A few other retailers who are now carrying the Creativity Roars by Moda Fabric websites also has this pattern available. So if you are buying our fabric locally from a quilt shop, thank you for supporting independent retailers, but you can also look them up for a pattern as well. So let's begin. So for one side of your dress, you will need about 2 to 3 yards of fabric, depending on the size. The size that I'm wearing is a large, and I used between 2¼ and 2½ yards of fabric for each side. Now note, I'm not calling one side the inside or the outside. This dress is fully reversible, so just think of it as color 1 and color 2, side 1 and side 2, as you're separating your patterns. So to begin, let's go ahead and put our fabric and our pattern. I'm going to put my color 2 off to the side and start with my color 1 fabric. I'm going to lay the folds of this fabric bolt with the selvage on this side. And I'm using about 2½ yards of fabric here, and I'm just going to go ahead and fold it in half, because this way I can cut 2 dresses at the same time. Now mind you, this is not inside and outside piece, but you do have a back and a front piece. The back and the front piece, they're both the same, but you need 2 of them. You'll need to have 2 dresses cut on the folds of each color. So because I just folded this in half, one thing you do have to be mindful of is if you're using a directional print fabric, as I am here. If I just go ahead and lay this pattern down and cut it, one side is going to be facing up and the other is going to be facing down. So to prevent that, I'm going to just go ahead and cut along the folds of this fabric right here. Okay. And the direction that's facing downward, I'm just going to go ahead and flip it over so that both of my dresses will have the same directional print. And if you're anything like me, you will meticulously try to match up these prints as much as possible so that when you do sew both sides of it, you'll have them as even as possible along that seam. And then what we want to do is then you want to go ahead and this is my original pattern. that I've made meticulously over and over again. The most difficult challenge with this dress is to just make sure you have a really good underarm seam and all of your curves, your neckline and the bottom, and it's a really good curve for it to fit properly. So my fold of the pattern is going to go ahead along with the fold of this seam right here. And then I'm going to cut this out. Your pattern already has the seam allowance included in the pattern, and I've made the seam allowance for about 1/2 of an inch. So when you are cutting out your pattern, you can just cut right along the edges. You do not need to cut an extra 1/2 inch for your seam allowance. So once my first dress pattern is all cut out, I'm just going to take my straps and save them. You can probably make a cute little drawstring purse or something to go with it. And I'm also going to retire my paper pattern. So now I have 2 full dress patterns made and cut from my color 1 fabric. I'm going to gently fold these up and now cut out my color 2 fabric. Remember, we want to have the fold of the fabric facing us and the selvage just facing the outside right here. Now, instead of using my paper pattern, I am going to use the color 1 dress pattern that I just cut out. But remember, if you are using a directional print fabric, do not just cut the fabric, fold it over on this fold and that fold, cut this fold and flip it over so you have both directions going in the same direction. Otherwise, one side is going to face up and the other is going to face down. So at this point, you should have 2 dress patterns from color 1 and 2 for color 2. Okay? I'm going to put my color 2 aside for now, and we are going to start sewing together our color 1 dress. Open the full dress up. And you want to open the second half of it up. Now, the side that you're working with first, you want to have it with the bright side facing up. And on the second half of it, you want to have the bright side facing down. I'm going to put them together, bright side to bright side. And you want to line up your shoulder seams and then your side seams. When you're pinning these, it's better to pin it on the interior as opposed to pinning it right on your edges, as this way you can sew it in both directions, meaning the left and the right side. And if you're going to be keeping the bulk of your fabric on the outside of your machine, going to the left, as you should, then you do not have to worry about taking these pins out right away. I'm going to just use some chalk to mark the shoulder seams that I'm going to be sewing. This is my shoulder seam. This is my armhole, so I do not want to sew over there. But then this is my entire side seam. So I'm going to be sewing around the curve and all the way down. Okay? I'm going to just flip this dress over so I can do the exact same thing on the other side. And again, the reason why I'm doing it like this is so that when I'm sewing it, the bulk of the fabric is going to go towards the left of your machine. I'm just going to be sewing my shoulder seam and then my side seam. And for color 2, we're going to do the exact same thing with the bright side facing upward, and we're going to cover it with the second half of this with the bright side facing down. And you're going to pin it exactly the same, pin it, and you are going to be sewing around your shoulder seam and then your side seam on both sides.
Now that I am getting ready to sew this, I'm going to speed up my video just a little bit, just so you guys don't have to watch the process of its sewing. But I started with my shoulder seams, I backstitched when I started and finished. I'm going to then follow up with the second shoulder seam just because of the way that it actually fits into my machine. It makes it more of a continuous stitch for me, and I don't have to flip it over at this point. And after I did both shoulders, I am now going to go ahead and sew my side seam. Be very mindful around this curve. You want to sew this curve very well. You don't want to put a right angle on there or too much of a point, because once you do turn it over to the bright side, it will start to pucker. So you definitely want to be very gentle as you go around the curve, and also check that your fabrics are lined up. If you didn't pin it all the way down, just make sure that both of those side seams are together, and the second fabric underneath it, that it's just not going off to the side. And once you do both shoulders and one side, again, you want to keep the fabric on the left side of your machine. So just flip it over and go ahead and again, be very gentle with that curve and just sew all the way down that underarm seam down the side to the bottom of the dress. And remember, this dress is reversible, but you are making two of the same dresses. So exactly what you did with color 1, you're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing with color 2. You are going to sew those shoulder seams, both the left and the right, and then you are going to sew the side seams, both the left and the right. Once you finish sewing both of your dresses, we want to go back and trim away any excess fabric. We especially want to be mindful of this curve, those underarm curves. You can clip into it, you can clip little triangles into it. You want to give as much easement as possible, because once we turn this over to the bright side, because of that curve, we want to eliminate any puckering that's possible. So you can trim away excess fabric, you can clip into it. Whatever you do, just be very mindful that you do not cut into your sewing lines. And you want to do this on both underarms, both the right and left underarm for color 2 and for color 1. Also, don't forget to remove your pins. We did pin them on the interior, so you did not take them out while you were sewing, but you definitely at this point want to make sure that every single pin that you inserted into both color 1 and color 2 fabrics have been removed.
Okay, great. So at this point, you should have your color 1 dress, sewn shoulders and side seams, and your color 2 shoulders and side seams. Okay. My color 2 dress, I'm going to turn it over to the bright side. I'm going to just check this curve along here to make sure that it's not bulking or there's nothing kind of puckering together. Same with this one, they both look good. And I did the same for the other one already. And what I'm going to do is I am going to insert my color 2 dress into my color 1. I'm going to match them up shoulder to shoulder. I'm going to put the arms beside each other and match up my shoulder seams. I'm going to just put a pin right here just to secure it. Do the same for the other side, shoulder to shoulder. Now, both of these dresses, back and front, they're both the same, so there is really no distinct orientation of which is the back and which is the front. They should both be the same. Got my shoulder seams matching up, got my neck seams matching up, and my shoulders, and I'm just going to shake it out just to make sure that the length of the dress goes downward. Okay? And then my next sewing step, as you can see here, your dresses should be bright sides to bright sides. My next sewing step is to remove the arm from my sewing machine and sew all the way around the circumference of this neckline to connect both dresses together. And once you have your neckline sewn, you want to go ahead and just clip into these seams right here. Be mindful that you don't cut into your sewing line because you don't want to have a hole in there. You just want to have this curve nice and smooth once you turn it over to the bright side, and just give this dress a very flawless neckline on both sides. Any extra threads and stuff, you can put them away and just do a little bit of quality control before you turn this dress over to the bright side. Once your neckline is clipped, you can now turn this dress over to the bright side and they should be connected. It's the only two parts of the dress that should be connected at this point. Once you turn color 2 over, just go ahead and pull it right back on through. So now you can see your dress coming together with color 1 and color 2. You are almost there. This dress is almost complete. There's just two final steps where we want to, well, maybe three. You definitely want to give this neckline good, good ironing right around the edges to separate them. If you wanted to do a top stitch around it, you could as well, just to strengthen that seam. Okay, and once you are at the iron, you are also going to turn the edges of your shoulders or your armholes, the edges of these armholes in by about half of an inch, so you line them up like this.
You can go ahead and just carefully pin these, lining them up, and remember we're folding them both in by about half of an inch or so. And once you do the left arm, go ahead and do the exact same thing to the right arm, and just again carefully pin them all around just to secure. To sew this sleeve, you are basically going to do almost the exact same thing that you did when you were sewing the neckline. The only difference is that the sleeve is a lot smaller in circumference, and you definitely want to be a little bit more mindful about your seam allowance. You don't want to use more than 3/8 of an inch seam allowance here. So between 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch. If you really do like that 1/2 of an inch seam allowance, once you've finished your initial 1/4 of an inch seam, you can go ahead and do a denim stitch, which is two parallel seams that are right next to each other, about 1/2 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch apart from each other. You can do that as a secondary to not only secure the stitch, but it also looks really nice and decorative as well. And remember, this dress is fully reversible, so what you do with one side, you want to do with the other. You sew in the first sleeve, don't forget to sew the second one as well.
So once your shoulder seams are all together, you want to kind of just give this dress a good shaking out, making sure that everything that needs to be down drops down to the bottom. Because now we are going to do the exact same step as you did with your sleeves to your hem. Okay, you can definitely iron this. It would help to secure your fold. And you can fold this under about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, whatever you decide to fold it, just make sure that they are both folded the same. And that's really easy to do by having it on a flat surface and pinning it under, or like I said, if you want to help yourself out, definitely iron that fold first, and it will make it a lot easier to pin.
And one more time, we are repeating the same step that we did when we were sewing the neckline and when we were sewing the shoulders especially. We are going to put this hem under the arm of your machine. We're going to be sewing all the way around the full circumference of this dress, connecting both color 1 and color 2 together. You definitely want to use about a 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And if you do decide that you want to do a denim stitch as a decorative stitch and to secure it, I would highly recommend that once you sew around the full base of the circumference of this fabric, then you go back, you give it a really good ironing just in case there's any bubbling in the fabric, making sure everything lined up correctly. And once you iron it and get all that straightened out and you do a second stitch, it definitely should help to lay this dress in place a lot better.
And it's finished. You should now have your double-sided reversible tunic dress. Thank you guys so much for sewing with us. I hope you create a lot of these dresses. The awesome thing, like I said, one of them means two of them. So for anyone who might not have access to laundry facilities or in need of a dress, better to make them two as opposed to one. Thank you guys for sewing with us. We'll see you guys soon.